Man, is it that time already? Must be, because I'm looking at the schedule and we're doing a comprehensive review on the Ducati 1098. That means our time with it is coming to a close, which is liable to bring a tear to my eye. If you've watched any of our videos on the 1098, you'll no doubt have heard both myself and Spite and Whitney and Josh simp almost endlessly over this bike being the most exciting leader bike we've ridden in a minute. While the CBR 1000 RRR SP Fireblade, yes, that name is still way too long, it gave you a blood-pumping adrenaline rush, the 1098 is just a little bit more subtle. Not by much, it'll still rip your arms off, but it has the courtesy of asking you how you're doing while it does it. That being said, it's not a perfect motorcycle, and while it pains me dearly to talk about some of the problems, they're far from deal killers. If you're one of those types of people who wants to skip right to the end for the final verdict, let me spoil it just a bit. The 1098 is a 100% motorcycle worth owning, with a few caveats. Oh, see what I did there? A little bit of the bait and hook. Now you're gonna have to watch the video. But why do I have a 1098 in the shop in the first place? Well, it's part of our modern classic bike giveaway series. Normally that series is where we give away cruisers and other neo-retro bikes, but we wanted to try something a little bit different this time around, and I think it's been a big success. You guys have seemed to really enjoy the 1098. All of our bikes are powered by the folks over on yammie.co, where you can sign up to support the series and get access to our Discord server, exclusive weekly live streams, and behind-the-scenes looks at what's going on at Yammie Noob HQ. But if you're one of those loner types that doesn't want to talk to anyone when they go in to pick up their order from Chipotle, then we've got our merch store and YN Moto, where you can get hats, t-shirts, tires, parts, helmets, and all the goodies you need to look your best both on and off the bike, because your papa wants you to be the best you can be. Every dollar you spend is an entry to win. But since I'm such a nice guy and you want to get the best chance to win this Italian stallion, use the code Ducati3X for 3X entries and 10% off your order. Either way, you'd better hurry because the Ducati wraps up on Friday, so get your entries in while you can. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk specs. We've got a bunch of videos that go into the exhaustive details about this bike, but for those of you in the cheap sheets, I'm gonna broad stroke it for you. The 1098 ran from 2007, replacing the 999, to 2009, when it was replaced by the 1198. The year it came out, it cleaned house in World Superbike, whooping up on the competition. The bike was a real-life version of the no, go back meme. You see, when Ducati unveiled the 999, literally every Ducatista took up their espresso spoon in anger for the sheer audacity of Ducati for trying something new. What was new? 2 vertical headlights and no single-sided swing arm. If you're thinking that doesn't sound like much, then clearly you're an unenlightened troglodyte. You see, not having a single-sided swing arm is like not having an L-twin engine. Ducatistas the world over cried out in anger, and Ducati came out with the 1098, basing it off of the 998 and hoping that the world would simply forget that the 999 was a thing. Although the 999 was a really good motorcycle and it raced really, really well, but it was kind of ugly. Now, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself that a Ducati 1098 surely would have a 1098cc L-twin engine in it, right? Wrong. It's actually got a 1099 or an 1198cc L-twin, depending on which model you bought. There were actually 3 different models: the 1098 base, which is what our bike is, the 1098S, and the 1098R. There's some differences between the different models, but let's stick with the engine for now. The 1098 and the 1098S shared the same 1099cc engine, which puts down 160 horsepower and 90 foot-pounds of torque. By today's standards, a mere 160 horsepower doesn't sound like much, especially compared to the blistering 200 plus horsepower machines that you can just go buy now because the world is kind of broken. But the real star of the show is the torque. There's no getting around how hard those 90 torques smack you upside the head. The first few times you ride it can be genuinely a little scary, especially given the bike's tech, which we'll talk in a second. The bike weighs in at 381 pounds dry, which is lighter than modern bikes by a good 20 pounds. Back in 2007, the 1098 had the highest torque to weight ratio of any production bike ever made. That's a cool fact. But how fast was it? How does a 3-second 0 to 60 sound, or maybe a 10-second quarter-mile time at 144 miles an hour? It tops out at 173 miles an hour, which I suppose means that it's slower than a Gixxer 600 if you believe Facebook, but in reality, this bike is crazy fast, and the gears are short so that once you tap out of one and shift up, you're maybe getting another 1,000 RPMs before you have to shift again. The 1098R was even faster because, of course, it needed to be. That bike was putting down 180 horsepower and 99 foot-pounds of torque and a dry weight of 364 pounds. Now you see how this bike won World Superbike and was the bike to buy when it came out. We don't have numbers for the 1098R, but whatever the base bike could do, the R could do it better. Oh, and before I forget, it's got a dry clutch, so be prepared to have a bunch of normies walk up to you at a gas station to tell you that your bike is broken and you should get it over to a mechanic. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty damn loud at first, but you just kinda get used to it. Just hopefully you don't mind the sound of marbles in a dryer. But when you're at full lean at the track, it's pretty sweet. So, the 1098 goes like a stabbed rat, but what else is new? None of that matters if it doesn't handle well. Thankfully, the engineers back in 2007 knew what they were doing. On the base model, you got a fully adjustable Showa 43mm front fork and a fully adjustable Showa shock out back. Between that and a steel trellis frame, the 1098 handles super well. I have an entire track vlog on the 1098 where I go over the bike and its performance on track, which you should definitely go and check out. But suffice it to say, the 1098 is an absolute animal around a racetrack. The only downside is that the spring at the rear shock is set up for a rider closer to Spite's size than mine. Even after backing the preload all the way out, I was only able to get the sag just into spec for my weight. So if you're 5'11 and 160-ish pounds like I am and want to turn a 1098 into a track bike, you're probably going to want a new rear shock. That being said, I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary since the bike requires a much braver soul than I am to push it to expert level club racer territory. Now, if you pick up a 1098S or an R, you'll get Öhlins front and rear, and on the R, you're getting a TTXR rear shock versus a base model Öhlins spring, but let's be real, no one's going to be able to tell the difference unless they're Jack Miller. All models are equipped with the same Brembo monoblock calipers, which provide a metric ton of braking force and great feel through the lever, even compared to modern braking setups. Bikes peaked in 2007. We've said it before, I'm gonna say it again. Next up, ergonomics. How's the bike feel when you're sitting on it? Honestly, it's a little strange if you're used to modern super sport styled motorcycle. The 1098 is a physically massive motorcycle. Looking at it side by side with the 959 Panigale we rented, you could really see how the race bike design language has changed over the years. There's only a handful of cuts in the fairings on the 1098, leaving super uniform plastics with clean lines and soft edges. The tail section is ginormous, especially with the twin undertail exhaust with a roomy seat for both rider and, oddly enough, the pillion. I wouldn't ride too up on this bike because I'm not a maniac, but if you wanted to, there's more room on the 1098 than most other sport bikes. But your pillion's tush is probably going to get roasted by the exhaust. The reach to the bar is pretty good and the peg height is completely reasonable. It's honestly pushing CBR 1000 RR levels of comfort. You can easily spend several hours on the bike running through the twisties, and while it's not as comfortable as a naked bike, you won't have to run over to the chiropractor to get your spine realigned. The early 2000s was this weird coalescence between race bikes being actually halfway decent street bikes and vice versa, something that the market not being as segmented as it is today. I mean, yeah, you had your nakeds and your sport bikes, but you didn't have sport tours and street sport bikes like the 650s. Back in the day, you could reasonably expect to be able to commute to and from the office on your track toy. I'm not gonna lie, I kinda miss those days. At the very least, we all need to commute on Turbo Hayabusas, then there wouldn't be any traffic because everyone would be at warp speed. The only downside to commuting on the 1098 is that we will roast your manly bits or lady parts pretty quick. In their infinite wisdom, Ducati continues even to this day to run their exhaust pipes right underneath your taint, and the 1098 is no exception. Now let's have a little quick chat about the technology on the bike. And we're done. Gee, that was quick. It's got an on and off switch. What more do you want? Seriously though, no ABS, no traction control, no wheelie control, no rider modes, no ride-by-wire, none of that modern stuff that's designed to keep you shiny side up. There are some upsides and downsides to this. First, let's talk positives. It leaves total control of the motorcycle in your hand. There's no ride-by-wire system sending your input on the throttle to a computer and then down to the engine. You pull the throttle and the bike gives you as much power as you're asking from. It also means that the bike is fueled perfectly from the factory. This was back in the day before all the crazy emission stuff on bikes, meaning there's no flat spots or dead zones in the power band. It is perfectly smooth from idle to redline. It's a really nice thing. Now, the downsides. It leaves total control of the motorcycle in your hands. Let's face it, computers are better at braking than we are in modulating the throttle and preventing wheelies. The 1098 is a handful on a good day, but if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, it'll buck you off and leave you in a squishy pile on the side of the road. It's absolutely not a bike you should be getting as your first foray into big power bikes. As stupid as it sounds, you might want to buy a modern day R1 before you hop on in a 1098. I mean, come on guys, it's the last great analog superbike. It's awesome. But there's one thing we still need to talk about, and that's cost and reliability. It's a Ducati after all, and it's almost old enough to drive. Well, you don't have to worry about electrical gremlins, but you do need to run the bike as often as you can or leave it on a tender. The charging system on the bike isn't the most efficient thing in the world, and if your battery isn't brand new, you might find yourself with a dead battery as often as we did. It's a pain to replace the battery, but the solution is just to ride it more. But then you run up against the other problem. The 1098 requires a desmodromic valve check every 7,500 miles, as well as a valve belt check every 7,500 and a full replacement every 15,000. Depending on how much you ride the bike, that is going to add up very quickly. If you want a breakdown of the costs on this bike versus other era-appropriate leader bikes, I made a video going over just that and found that, surprise, surprise, the Ducati is way more expensive to own, but it's a small price to pay for being better than your friends. The Ducati 1098 is truly a magical and special motorcycle. There are very, very few motorcycles I have ridden in 2021 that have elicited such awesome feelings to me. It rides so well, the throttle is so perfect on it, balances itself so nicely on the side of the tire, it really picks the line really nicely, and if you want a brawl of a motorcycle to ride, the 1098 just might be the best thing you can buy. Big twin super bikes like this that make upwards of 150, 160 horsepower, they are just awesome to ride. They make great daily drivers if you're willing to put up with the back problems a little bit, and once you get them on track, they really, really come alive. The 1098 is an excellent motorcycle and well worth the ride if you've never experienced an older Ducati. As we've said multiple times on the channel, motorcycles kind of peaked in the late 2000s, and this thing is just one more example of how good we used to have it. If you want to get entered to win ours, remember to click the links down below and get your entries in. You've got until this Friday, and then it's going to its new owner. I'm not jealous. It's fine. Just got to put it in a truck and give it away. That's fine. Catch and release, you know, that's how it goes. Fact: Londoners in the 1600s were advised to keep fart jars, consisting of trapped fart odors, on hand to combat the bubonic plague. The idea was that the potent smell would somehow purify the air. Aren't you thankful for modern science? We know things now. Isn't it nice to know things? Goodbye. All right, look, you don't have to lie to me. If you had time for one Yammie Noob video all the way to the end, you probably have time for another one. You should probably just click this link and watch the video right over here. I promise it's gonna be good. You won't regret it. Seriously, you should just click it. I'm sure it's good. We only make good stuff around here. You should just watch it. Why are you still here?